Imagine this for a second. The Deputy Prime Minister, the woman standing one heartbeat away from number 10, is being quietly described by people inside her own party as a disaster waiting to happen, while others are whispering she might be the only person who can actually save Labour. If Keir Starmer stumbles, even slightly, Angela Rayner isn't just a loyal deputy, she could be his biggest threat. And that raises a jaw-dropping question no one wants to say out loud. Are we watching the birth of Britain's next Prime Minister? Welcome to Power and Policy UK, the channel where we cut through the spin and break down the real power games shaping Britain's future. Today, we're digging into a political fault line at the very top of government. Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, and the explosive question no one wants to ask out loud, is Labour already facing its next leadership battle? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most eyebrow-raising stories in British politics right now. A story that's been quietly bubbling under the surface and has suddenly burst into the open. The phrase that set Westminster buzzing is brutal, blunt, and impossible to ignore. She would be a disaster, and at the centre of it all is Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, apparently taking aim at her own boss, Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The big question everyone's now whispering, or outright asking, is this: are we watching the early stages of a leadership challenge? And could Angela Rayner realistically be our next Prime Minister? Now, let's set the scene properly. Keir Starmer is already in number 10, having led Labour back into government after years in opposition. His leadership style has been methodical, disciplined, and deliberately cautious. Supporters call it grown-up politics. Critics call it dull, technocratic, and painfully uninspiring. And that tension inside Labour hasn't gone away just because they won power. In fact, in many ways, it's intensified. Angela Rayner represents a very different political energy. Where Starmer is careful, she's confrontational. Where he's lawyerly, she's visceral. She speaks in a way that feels raw, emotional, and rooted in class identity. To her supporters, she's authentic in a way politics desperately needs. To her critics, she's undisciplined, volatile, and prone to self-inflicted damage. That split perception is exactly why this story matters. The phrase, "she would be a disaster," is doing the rounds, not because Rayner said it about Starmer directly on camera, but because it reflects what insiders say is a deepening fracture at the top of government. Reports suggest Rayner has grown increasingly frustrated with Starmer's cautious approach, particularly on issues like workers' rights, public sector pay, and the cost of living crisis. From her point of view, Labour didn't win power just to manage decline more politely. From Starmer's point of view, bold rhetoric without ironclad delivery risks spooking markets, voters, and international allies. This is where it gets interesting. Rayner isn't some random backbencher throwing stones. She's Deputy Prime Minister. She's the most senior figure in the party after Starmer himself. And crucially, she has a strong base of support within the Labour movement, especially among trade unions and grassroots activists who feel the party has drifted too far toward the centre. Behind closed doors, the tension has reportedly been simmering for months. Rayner has pushed for more aggressive reform, faster action, and clearer ideological direction. Starmer, meanwhile, has prioritized stability, credibility, and incremental change. When those two philosophies collide, it's not hard to see why some in Starmer's camp would privately describe Rayner as a disaster waiting to happen if she were ever to take the top job. But here's the flip side. To Rayner's supporters, that exact criticism is proof she's dangerous to the status quo, and therefore exactly what's needed. They argue that Starmer's cautious approach risks alienating the very voters who put Labour back in power. if living standards don't improve quickly, if public services continue to creak, and if labor starts to look indistinguishable from the governments that came before, then Starmer's authority could weaken fast. And that's where the next PM question suddenly doesn't feel so far-fetched. British politics has a long history of leaders being toppled not by elections, but by their own parties. If Labour MPs start to panic about polls, by-elections or internal morale, the knives could come out. In that scenario, Angela Rayner is one of the very few figures with the profile, the passion, and the organisational support to mount a serious challenge. Of course, becoming Prime Minister isn't just about passion. This is where Rayner's vulnerabilities come sharply into focus. She has a history of headlines that make party strategists wince. Off-the-cuff remarks, public rows, moments that play brilliantly on social media, but terribly in focus groups. The right-wing press would have a field day with her, and even some Labour MPs quietly admit she scares them more than the opposition ever could. There's also the question of trust. Starmer built his leadership on the promise of professionalism and discipline after years of internal chaos. For MPs who lived through that period, the idea of handing the party to someone they see as unpredictable is genuinely frightening. To them, she would be a disaster isn't just an insult, it's a warning. But here's the thing many underestimate: Angela Rayner connects. In an age of scripted politicians and media training, that counts for a lot. She speaks to people who feel ignored, patronized, or outright dismissed by politics. If the country enters another period of economic pain, that emotional connection could suddenly matter more than perfect messaging. So is she really aiming at Starmer? Publicly, she remains loyal. Privately, loyalty in politics is always conditional. Right now, she doesn't need to move. All she has to do is exist as an alternative. Every stumble Starmer makes strengthens her hand without her lifting a finger. This isn't about an imminent coup. It's about positioning. It's about narratives forming early. It's about a party asking itself what kind of leadership it really wants now that it's back in power: safe management or disruptive energy. If Starmer succeeds, Rayner stays deputy and the story fades. If he falters, even slightly, this story becomes something much bigger. And those words, "she would be a disaster," may come back to haunt the people who said them. Because in British politics, disasters and saviours are often the same person, just viewed from different sides of the room. If you want clear, no-nonsense analysis of UK politics beyond the headlines, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Power and Policy UK for weekly deep dives into the people, power and policies running the country. And let us know in the comments, could Angela Rayner really be our next Prime Minister?